Hi. Happy
Sunday.
And tomorrow is Mom's birthday.
It's not Mom's birthday.
It is Mom's birthday. All right. What are you going to tell them?
Okay.
Bye.
Some kids are going to Hudson's party.
You went to Hudson's birthday party?
Got soaking wet too.
Don't know.
What showed up at Hudson's party?
What showed up?
What was making all that noise?
About
Stop. No, what was it? Well, chickens. They were roosters.
Yes, they were roosters.
And were they talking to you? Bok, 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 yeah.
Oh, and Hudson's mom shot them with a little water gun.
Yep. She squirted water to get them to go away, didn't she? All right. Tell them bye. Say see you next week.
And one go to bed.
And
One went away.
One got ran over by our friend's
Yes,
grandma.
one ran over it. Yes, but we didn't see that. All right.
Yeah.
Tell them bye.
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 I watch you.
Go on.
I
Go to Daddy.
don't need to go pee.
All right. I have decided when we were at a lectureship a couple of weeks ago, we found this book, and it's Proverbs for Women, and it's called Faith Walk. And that is what I have decided to do for our study for the next several weeks. And it's basically studies just from the book of Proverbs. So I wanted to start today just by a little bit of background. And I know most of you, if not all of you all know this, but I don't like just jumping into a new study without just a little bit of background. And to be honest, I want to do the background for myself to kind of get my mind in the right place and get me on the right path to start this book. So, some stuff about Proverbs. The first thing that I had that I wrote down that came to my mind was Proverbs was written by Solomon. And when I say Solomon, when I'm teaching the kids at church, when I'm teaching my kids, when you're talking with a group of adults or whoever, when you say Solomon, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I would bet would come to most people's mind, is what did he do? He asked for wisdom. He was the wisest person in the Bible. He asked for wisdom. He could have asked for anything in the world. He could have asked for money, whatever, you name it, clothes, whatever. And he asked for wisdom. So he is known for that. I want to say in our terms today, he's famous for that. That's what he's famous for. He was also the son of David and Bathsheba. He was the final king of Israel before the kingdom split. And that's pretty significant as well. When Solomon first became king, he sought after God, but it didn't stay that way. By the time at the end of his reign, he had turned away from God and turned to idols. So, you can say the good went wrong. He started out really good. He believed in God. He trusted God. He followed God's ways. By the end, not so much. He had completely changed his way of thinking, his life. Even though he had all this wisdom, even though God granted everything he asked for, still, he went the wrong way. He went down the wrong path. Another famous account, or what I would say, if I shouldn't say famous, well known, I think, to most people, is what I'm going to read next. While Solomon was king, he was confronted by two people. And we're going to read 1 Kings 3:16 through 28. And once I start reading this, you all will probably know, if you don't already, know what I'm going to talk about. Then the two prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Oh, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. Then on the third day, after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth, and we were alone. There was no one else with us in the house. Only we two were in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while your servant slept and laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. When I rose in the morning to nurse my child, behold, he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, behold, he was not the child I had born. But the other woman said, "No, the living child is mine and the dead child is yours." The first said, "No, the dead child is yours and the living child is mine." Thus they spoke before the king. Then the king says, this is Solomon, the one says, "This is my son that is alive and your son is dead." And the other says, "No, but your son is dead and my son is the living one." And the king said, "Bring me a sword." So a sword was brought before the king. And the king said, "Divide the living child in two and give half to one and half the other." Then the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because her heart yearned for her son, "Oh, my lord, give her the living child, and by no means put him to death." But the other said, "He shall neither be mine nor yours. Cut him, divide him." Then the king answered and said, "Give the living child to the first woman, and by no means put him to death. She is his mother." And all Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. So we know that account very well. You have these two women, and put it in today's terms, you have two people fighting over something, and it's mine, I had it first, or I had this one and she had that one. It reminds me of two kids, honestly. I know they're dealing with a human being, but I just think of my two kids, and that one's mine. No, that one's mine. No, that one is. No, I had that one. No, yours was this color. Mine was that color. Just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But like Solomon, when he said he was going to cut that baby in two, the real mama said no. She loved her son so much she would just give it to this other woman. Just go on and give my child away. I don't want any harm to come to my child. My two children, okay, I'm going to throw it away, or I'm going to take it, or I'm going to do something else with it. All of a sudden, the rightful owner goes, "Okay, it's mine," or "Okay, no, don't do that. He can have it. She can have it." It reminds me of that. But the wisdom, when you're in that situation and these two women are coming to you, Solomon had no clue whose child it was. None. He probably didn't even know these women. And they came up to him, and he's never seen this child. And it's just by word. They had no test back then. They had nothing. They didn't do all that. They went to the judge. They wanted an answer. And so he had the wisdom. God gave him the wisdom to come up with the situation of, okay, I'll just cut the child in half. That sounds harsh, but he got the right answer, didn't he? Without the child being in harm, he got the right answer. And if you notice, the bickering didn't go on. The bickering didn't go on. When he said cut the child in half, the real mother said no. The false mother said, "Sure, cut him up. It doesn't bother me." What mother would say, "Cut my child up? You can cut my child up"? So he knew. He was smart enough to know. This shows also he had wisdom, but he had common sense, right? Kind of like what we just said. Common sense tells you a real mother is not just going to hand over her child and say, "Okay, I don't care about him anymore. Just chop him up, whatever." They're not going to do that. So Solomon had common sense as well. We may also know Solomon for building the temple, but he started off good, right? He built this temple for God. It was good. Everything was going good. But then years passed, and what happened to the temple? King Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. Okay? So by the time of the end of Solomon's reign, the temple is destroyed. Another thing, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And in Deuteronomy chapter 17, God warned that a king with many wives would be led astray. Well, let's see. He had 700 wives. I would say that counts as many wives. God warns he will be led astray. What happens? He was led astray. So that's kind of where we're focusing. That's kind of the guy we're talking about. That is Solomon. So today, what our focus is going to be on for the next few minutes is distractions. And we're going to talk about how Solomon, his 700 wives, it took one of those 700 distracted him. And in the example that she gave in the book was her child, they had shiny doorknobs, and when her child was real small, she noticed the shiny doorknob, And her child would sit there and look at this doorknob for 20, 30 minutes at a time. And just look at it. She wouldn't touch it. She wouldn't try to think. She would just look at it. And you could just see those wheels turning. Well, when it first began, it was a minor distraction. You walk down the hallway, you see this shiny doorknob, you turn your head and keep walking. Well, by the end of it, what happened? We were sitting there staring at this doorknob for 30 minutes. How many of us in everyday life, we have something that distracts us for just a second, but then that second turns into minutes, that minute turns into hours, hours turns into days, days turns into weeks, and before we know it, this distraction has consumed us. And if you want to place the word sin in there, fine. This sin consumes us. We start out by thinking about it, then we end up trying it, then, let's do a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it consumes us. Before Solomon realized it, his distraction, one of his foreign wives, had him worshiping idols and building places of worship for these women, for these idols. He was not worshiping God. He had turned away from God. And his wife, one of them, helped him do that. Think about that. In our lives, Solomon's own wife was a distraction. What are our distractions? In our walk with God, in our daily Bible study, in our life, are our spouses, our children? You can fill in the blank. Sports, that has been a major distraction for us the past couple of months. It has consumed us. What has been your distraction? We have to be careful. And distractions aren't bad unless we let them consume us. We cannot be like Solomon, but that's why, I'm not going to say that's why. That's one of the things that the book of Proverbs is about, is making us realize the danger of distraction. And Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 7:15, I have seen everything. In my lifetime, I have seen everything. So Solomon asked for wisdom. God granted him the wisdom, but we still see him being distracted. He did not use his wisdom in his distraction. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He was wise enough, smart enough to know he should not be building these idols, that he should not have went to these foreign women. It was forbidden by God, but he did it anyway, and it ended badly for him. So, like Solomon, we need to ask God for wisdom, but we got to be careful what we do with it. We got to ask wisdom in the right manner. Use wisdom in the right manner. So in this study, the next few weeks, we're going to talk about the path of folly, the path of wisdom, the angry woman, the gentle woman, the whispering woman, the gracious woman, the sluggish woman, the diligent woman, the truthful and merciful woman. And all this is coming from Proverbs. We're going to stay in the book of Proverbs. We're going to see how we can use our wisdom each and every day in our walk with God or in our Christian life. I'm going to end with Proverbs 4:10 through 14. It says, Hear my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction, do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. So, that's our focus of our study. God has given us the words. We are to hear them. We are to accept them. And if we do, what? The years of your life will be many. We are taught the way of wisdom. We are led in the paths of uprightness. When we walk, our steps will not be hampered. If we run, we're not going to stumble. We have to hold on to instruction. Guard her. Guard the instruction. Guard the wisdom. For she is your life. And like this says, if you enter the path of the wicked, it's not going to end well. So next week we are going to talk about the woman folly. There's two paths. That's what this book kind of ended with. This introduction chapter was, do you take the path of wisdom or do you take the path of folly? And even though you have the wisdom, do you follow it or do you still have that distraction? Do you still veer off? And if you do, that's okay. But do you come back? Or do you, like Solomon, and you just keep spiraling out of control until it's too late? You've destroyed everything good that you've done. You haven't followed God like you were supposed to. Have you spiraled out of control? So I hope this study is going to be a good one. Like I said, I've never done this book before. I have not studied this before. So we are learning together. But I hope everyone will enjoy it. And I hope everyone has a great week. And I will see you all here next week.